It's terror time. Subscribe now and hit that like button so you don't miss any story. The dusty air of my small museum in Sevenoaks always smelled of formaldehyde and broken promises. It was a smell that seeped into your bones, as familiar as the sharp tools on my workbench. But that night, as I examined my latest creation under the weak, yellow light, a wildcat with the delicate, pale forepaws of a child, I saw the movement. Not a tremor, not a trick of the shadows. It was an eyelid, that human eyelid surrounding a glass feline eye, contracting slowly and deliberately, as if winking at me. In that icy blink, something deep within me shattered, deeper than the bones I realigned. It was as if the perfection I sought, that eternal beauty frozen in time, had finally found a voice. A silent voice, heavy with a hatred that began to pulse within the display cases. My name is Edward, and my obsession didn't start with evil, believe me. It started with beauty. The art of taxidermy always fascinated me. The ability to preserve a moment of wild life, to trap fleeting existence in an eternal pose. But Brighton was too gray, too loud. I moved to Sevenoaks seeking peace, and a spacious cellar I transformed into a workshop and gallery. My work was good, praised even, but never perfect. Something was always missing, a spark, a glimmer only true life possessed. Death, however skillfully disguised, always betrayed itself. Until the night I hit the dog. It wasn't my fault. The animal, a scrawny, dirty mongrel, dashed across the old Canterbury Road in front of me during a torrential downpour. The impact was sickeningly dull. I stopped, trembling. The body was ruined. But the eyes, those brown eyes still held a wet reflection of life, an intelligence fading. An absurd, repulsive idea flashed through my mind like lightning, and then, like a maggot, it burrowed in, and grew, and fed. If life couldn't be preserved, perhaps fragments of it, the most expressive parts, could lend their essence to the inanimate. It wasn't a leap, but a slow, inevitable slide into the abyss. The first donation was almost accidental. A vagrant, known only as Joe, found already cold behind the old cinema. His hands, they were expressive, full of stories never to be told. I transplanted them onto an old piece, a maned wolf. The effect was disturbingly magnificent. The human hands, aged and gnarled, clutching an imaginary prey in the predator's forepaws, gave it an aura of agony and ferocity unlike anything before. Perfection, it seemed, wasn't found in purity, but in monstrous fusion. The workshop, once a place of silent concentration, became a temple of horrors. The smell of formaldehyde now mingled with the coppery tang of blood and an underlying odor of raw meat that never fully dissipated. I didn't kill, not initially. I was a scavenger, an urban necrophage. Unclaimed accident victims, lost souls whose disappearance left no trace. Theo, an app driver found in an alley with a broken neck, donated his eyes, deep and brown like the mongrel's, to a long-eared owl. Human pupils dilated within the owl's facial disc created an illusion of terrifying recognition. Fiona, a student whose body was fished from the Medway, offered her mouth, slightly curved in a sad smile, to a crocodile. The suture was my masterpiece, human skin merging with the scaled hide, creating a crocodilian smile that seemed to whisper watery secrets. Each piece grew bolder, more complex. A giant anteater with delicate human ears. A marmoset with tiny human fingers clutching a plastic insect. The silent collection grew, imposing and grotesque, within the display cases of my private museum, illuminated by bulbs that cast dancing shadows on the brick walls. The atmosphere in the cellar grew oppressive, charged with a static energy that made the hairs on my arms stand on end. The silence was no longer empty. It was thick, expectant. I began to feel their eyes following me. Not the glass eyes, but the presence behind them. Theo's owl eyes seemed to turn its head a few degrees further than I'd left it when my back was turned. Fiona's crocodile mouth seemed slightly more open, as if trying to breathe. And the wildcat with child's hands. Its small, pale hands seemed to have shifted, resting on its tawny belly in a pose I didn't recall setting. Exhaustion, guilt gnawing at my sanity, I tried to convince myself. But fear, cold and metallic, began to take root in my throat, more constant than the smell of death. The change was gradual, undeniable. Consciousness didn't awaken in individuals, but in the collection. A hive mind formed from the final flashes of terror, pain, and injustice trapped in those human fragments stitched to animal flesh. I could feel their hatred, a mute sonic wave echoing off the cellar walls. It was like being inside a vast, frozen heart, each beat a pulse of concentrated rancor. They didn't sleep. They watched. They remembered. Remembered my hands upon them, the final violation, the eternal imprisonment in shapes not their own. Vengeance became the only sun in their formaldehyde-dark universe. Now, as I write this by the light of a guttering candle, surrounded by display cases that are the walls of my world, the museum is no longer mine. It is theirs. The yellow light flickers, not from faulty wiring, but because the shadows are thickening, growing more solid. The air is heavy, laden with the sickly sweet smell of decay the formaldehyde can no longer mask. The glass of the display cases is fogging from the inside, not from condensation, but from the hot breath of creatures that shouldn't breathe. I hear scratching, not rats. It's human nails scraping against glass, from the inside out. Nails I filed and polished myself. The wildcat is sitting upright, no longer lying down. Its child's hands are pressed against the glass, sweaty palms leaving ghostly smears. Theo's eyes in the owl are fixed on me, unblinking, filled with a dark intelligence that transcends the animal. And the crocodile's mouth. It's open. Not in a smile, in a sigh. A wet sigh that mists the glass, and within that vapor, I swear I saw the fleeting shape of human lips moving, forming a silent word. Edward. You out there, listening to this. You think it's safe. Just a story. Feel that prickle on the back of your neck? That sudden hush in your house, as if something stopped to listen to? Look at the shadows in the corners of your room. Are they darker than they used to be? More dense? The silent collection learned to hate, and it learned there are worlds beyond my cellar. They crave new materials, new voices to join their mute chorus of vengeance. The eternal perfection I sought revealed itself as a nightmare transcending death. They will break the glass. It's only a matter of time. And when they do, the smell of formaldehyde and rot won't stay confined to Sevenoaks. It will spread. Perhaps it's reaching you now, a faint trace on the air, a cold premonition. What do you see right now when you blink? Is it just your imagination, or did something move over there, in that dark corner that always seemed harmless? The scratching against the glass has become a rhythmic tapping. Like tiny knuckles rapping. No, not knuckles. The knuckles of that child's hands against the pane. The maned wolf with Joe's hands is arching its back, muscles beneath the artificial hide taut like steel cables. The anteater's human ears are turned towards me, catching every sound, every frantic thud of my desperate heart. The candle is dying. The flame dances wildly, casting grotesque, writhing shadows that twist on the walls like awakening demons. The cold is intense, a cold that comes from within, from the icy core of their hatred. I feel the weight of the collective gaze, a physical pressure on my skin, crushing my reason. They are speaking to me, not with sounds, but with memories. I feel the sharp pain of Theo's broken neck, Fiona's suffocating panic sinking into the dark water, the confused terror of the child whose hands now tap the glass. Their final agonies are my tongue now. The perfection I created is a living monster, breathing rancor, and its sole purpose is to unmake its creator. The first crack appears in the wildcat's glass, thin, like a spider's thread, followed by another. The sound is sharp, the glass's silent scream. The final darkness approaches, and with it, the cold touch of hands that should never have touched anything again. The silent museum will find its voice, and it will begin with my scream. The first chill didn't come from the cold, but from that reflection where nothing should have been. I inherited the Victorian traveling mirror after my grandmother Edith passed away in Manchester, a heavy object framed in faded silver and dark walnut, swathed in waxed cloth smelling of mothballs and something else, something sickly sweet, like rotting flowers in an ancient tomb. I placed it in my Bristol flat, atop the pale wood dresser, a sinister contrast. It was beautiful, macabre, its carved flowers seeming to writhe in the weak afternoon light. I polished the glass with a soft cloth, and my own face stared back, weary from funeral arrangements, dark circles beneath my hazel eyes. Eleanor, 28, inheriting sorrows and strange objects. That's when I saw her for the first time. In the farthest corner of my bedroom's reflection, where only the white wall and a faded poster of Big Ben should be, stood a figure. A woman, dressed entirely in gray, an old-fashioned morning gown, meticulously draped, covering her from high neck to feet. Her face was pale, almost translucent, eyes dark like pits dug in dirty snow. She didn't move, just stood there, staring fixedly ahead, not directly at me, but at some point in my room space I couldn't see. I blinked, rubbed my eyes. When I looked again, she was still there. A shiver, unlike any cold I'd known, traced down my spine. I closed my eyes, counted to 10, breathed deeply. When I opened them, the corner of the reflection was empty. Just the white wall. A trick, fatigue, I thought. My mind playing games. But the impression of those dark eyes remained, burned onto my retinas. In the following days, I tried ignoring the mirror, covered it with a silk scarf that belonged to Granny Edith. But it seemed to emanate a morbid pull, a magnet for my gaze. At night, with only the bedside lamp on, casting long, dancing shadows, I'd catch myself pulling the scarf aside, just for a moment. And she'd be there, always in that initial corner, but different. Each night, a nuance. On the second night, her head seemed slightly tilted, as if listening. On the third, one gray-gloved hand seemed to rest on the back of a chair that didn't exist in my room. On the fourth, the scenery behind her changed. Instead of the indistinct white wall, there was the dark silhouette of a tall, crumbling bookcase, not mine. That's when true fear began to sprout, a cold, deep root in my gut. She wasn't just a static image. She was an intruder moving, bringing fragments of another place into my reflection. The research started as desperation. The faded label glued to the mirror's back read, Cartwright Studio, Exeter, 1898. Virtual trips to historical archives, forums for obsessed collectors, nothing about a Cartwright Studio in Exeter. Nothing about Victorian mirrors showing morning ghosts. Until I found, on an obscure blog about antique photography, a fleeting mention of daguerreotypes of madness. The text spoke of a wealthy Exeter widow in the late 1800s, Lady Eleanor Gray. She'd commissioned a series of daguerreotypes, unique images on silver plates, to document her own decline after her husband's death. The macabre detail, the one that froze my blood, was that the daguerreotypes weren't kept in albums, but fixed directly to the back of a traveling mirror, her personal mirror. Legend said Lady Eleanor saw her own madness unfold not just in the images, but in the distortions of her reflection over the years, until one day she simply vanished, leaving only the mirror. The blog didn't say what became of the mirror, but I knew. It was in my flat. From there, it was a headlong descent. The lady in gray didn't just approach, she invaded. no longer in the distant corner. Now, she appeared standing beside my reflected bed, her gaunt, shadowy figure looming over where I slept. Her face, once indistinct, gained terrifying detail, dark circles like wounds, thin, pale lips that sometimes seemed to twist in a silent snarl. The scenery behind her was always different. Fragments of a decaying room, peeling wallpaper, furniture shrouded in white sheets like gravecloths, dirty windows showing a perpetually overcast sky. The atmosphere in my real bedroom became oppressive, charged with a static energy that made the air vibrate. The sickly sweet, moldy smell intensified, especially at night, mingled now with a metallic tang, like dried blood. I felt a constant presence, even when I looked away from the mirror. Silence was no longer peaceful. It was a living thing, heavy, expectant, as if the air was holding its breath. Sleep became impossible. Every sound, every creak of the old Bristol Flats wood, made my heart race. My eyes in the reflection seemed deeper, more frightened, unwittingly echoing that woman's decay. The breaking point came on a stormy night. Winds howled outside, battering against my 10th floor windows. Rain drummed on the glass like bony fingers insisting on entry. The power failed, plunging the room into deep darkness, only torn by lightning flashes casting ghostly blue-white illumination. In the blackness, I flicked on my phone's torch. The trembling, unstable beam went straight to the mirror. And there she was. Not beside the bed, not in the corner. She was directly behind me in the reflection. Her face was centimeters from my reflected shoulder. I could see every horrifying detail, deep wrinkles like cracks in old porcelain, black eyes now bottomless, fixed not on my reflection, but on my real eyes, as if she could see me through the glass, the reflection, the very illusion of reality. Her lower lip trembled. Her gloved arm was raised, the pale, bony hand outstretched, thin fingers curved like claws, hovering centimeters from my neck in the mirror. The scenery behind her was the clearest yet, a ruined room, torn wallpaper and black damp stains spreading like cancer. In the center, on a table covered by a dirty cloth, lay a small rectangular object that glinted in the lightning, a daguerreotype. The terror was so absolute, so paralyzing, I froze. No scream, no movement. Just icy dread pinning me to the floor, watching that corpse hand draw ever closer to my reflection. You're there, listening to this, sitting safe in your home, maybe a light on. Feel that chill on your neck now, that sudden prickle nothing to do with temperature? It's just the story, you think. But look at the nearest mirror, the one in the hall, the bathroom. Stare a second longer than usual. See just your reflection, or is there something? A flicker of shadow in the corner, a shape that shouldn't be there, a darting movement you blame on tiredness? That smell in your lounge, is it just dinner, or is there a strange taint, sweet and rotten, you can't place? The lady in gray learned to travel through silver and glass. Perhaps she's no longer confined to my mirror, or to Lady Eleanor's past. Perhaps she's just looking for a new window, a new reflection to inhabit, a new soul to witness her eternal vigil of grief and madness. Mind what you see reflected when you're alone. Mind the corners of your own mirrors. Since that night, I no longer look directly at the mirror. I keep it covered with an old, heavy blanket. But I feel when she's there, on the other side of the fabric and glass. A pressure in the air, a localized cold around the dresser, that unbearable stench of death and withered flowers permeating the room. Sometimes, in the absolute silence of the early hours, I hear a sound, a faint, dry dragging, like moldering cloth scraping on the wooden floor, coming from inside the covered mirror. Other times, I swear I hear a sigh, long and filled with infinite sadness, not my own. I feel her frustration, her impotent rage at being trapped, at me discovering her secret and refusing to be her captive audience. But I also feel her persistence. She won't leave. The mirror is her prison, but it's also her bridge. And I, unwittingly, became her host. The worst isn't the constant fear, the consuming insomnia, the paranoia of seeing movement in the corner of my eye. The worst is the insidious doubt growing inside me. When I catch my reflection quickly in any surface, the dark phone screen, the black window, my face, does it look paler? Do my eyes look deeper? Do the shadows beneath them look darker, more familiar? By staring into Lady Eleanor's madness, by witnessing the lady in Gray's decay, am I becoming part of the same portrait? Am I, Eleanor, destined to merge with that morning reflection, to be the next ghostly figure trapped in walnut and silver, eternally watching the next occupant of this room, closer each day? The traveling mirror travels no longer through space, but through time and sanity. And my journey seems only to have begun, a one-way trip into the heart of Gray. The first message arrived at 3:17 a.m., when King's Cross Station breathed its thinnest air. My name is Alfred, and for 10 years I've been the night telegraphist, a guardian of silent wires stitching lives together through dots and dashes. The telegraph office was my refuge, smelling of machine oil, old paper, and a perpetual cold the heaters could never conquer. The machine clattered, an abnormal cadence, not the clean Morse of routine dispatches, but something truncated, feverish. Characters formed on the thermal paper, a white tape spooling out like a pale tongue. Sender, none. My blood froze before I read the rest. Platform 3, 5:48. The gentleman in Panama hat trips over brown suitcase. Falls onto tracks. The 5:52 express cannot stop. He calls for Helen before being undone. A clinical description of horror. I checked the clock, 3:19 a.m. Over 2 hours away. A sick joke, I thought, some bored operator in another station, maybe Edinburgh or Liverpool, playing games. But the tone was wrong, icy, precise. And the sender? None. I ignored it, an effort that made me sweat despite the cold. Focused on cargo bulletins, administrative messages for London HQ. But at 5:48 a.m., a scream tore through the pre-dawn silence. I ran to the grimy window overlooking the platforms. On platform 3, commotion. People crowding the edge, peering down at the tracks. A Panama hat, crushed, smeared with grease, lay near an open brown suitcase, clothes spilling like entrails. The air left my lungs. Helen. The name echoed in my mind, a detail no prankster could guess. British Transport Police arrived. Questions. Confusion. I said I'd seen nothing, my hands trembling as I logged the incident. Returned to the telegraph office, the smell of oil now laced with iron, with blood. The next night was a vigil of terror. Every machine clatter was a punch to the chest. Then, 2:55 a.m. Sender. None. Ladies' restrooms. North Departure Hall. 4:30. The young woman in yellow dress, Laura, 19, finds ex-boyfriend, Michael, waiting. He won't accept the breakup. The knife is short, sharp. She bleeds on white tiles with floral pattern, throat slit. He weeps as he holds her. This time, no doubt, it was real. A death sentence. I ran. Found a security guard, old George, 60 years with a shuffling gait. He doubted. Nightmare, Alfred? Restrooms locked for cleaning this hour. I insisted, nearly dragging him. When we forced the locked door, the smell of fresh blood and disinfectant hit us like a fist. Laura, yellow dress soaked crimson, eyes wide at the ceiling. Beside her, Michael, bloodied knife on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably, clutching her still warm body. The white tiles with tiny blue flowers spattered scarlet. George retched. I swayed, the world spinning. The words on the thermal tape burned my retinas. Signed, Alistair Thorne. The name detonated in my memory. Alastair Thorne. The wire medium, as the Fleet Street rags called him in the 1880s. A famed spiritualist who claimed to commune with the dead through the telegraph, channeling messages in Morse during public seances. His death was legendary, macabre. During a live broadcast from King's Cross Telegraph Office, he fell into a deep trance. Witnesses said the wires seemed to glow, the room turned icy. Then, as his fingers hammered out one last encrypted message, he suffered a massive seizure. Died right there, slumped over the machine, fingers still curled on the keys. The final message was never deciphered. And now, he signed death prophecies on my machine, at King's Cross. Fear moved in, a permanent tenant in my gut. Nights became waking nightmares. The atmosphere in the telegraph office grew oppressive, the air thick, hard to breathe. The usual cold deepened, an ice radiating from the walls, the floor, the machines themselves. The smell of oil and paper now carried a sickly sweet note, like distant decay. And the messages kept coming. Always sender. None. Always signed Alastair Thorne. Always precise. Horrifying. They predicted a partial ceiling collapse in the main concourse, crushing a pasty vendor, Paul, 52. A sudden fire in a newsagent's kiosk engulfing the attendant, Sarah, 34, locked inside by mistake. I tried to intervene, ran, warned security, tried to find the victims. Sometimes I delayed fate, caused a diversion, but death always found its way, adjusting with perverse logic. Paul died days later, crushed by a maintenance beam that fell accidentally. Sarah perished in a gas leak at home. Alastair Thorne wasn't wrong. He just refined the horror. Despair consumed my sanity. I researched Alastair Thorne obsessively. Found crumbling penny dreadfuls in digital archives. Photos of him, a man with a thin mustache, intense and deeply sad eyes, hands resting on the telegraph like a pianist's on keys. Reports said his final seances grew darker, the messages more disturbing, speaking of severed lines and fates woven in shadow. The undeciphered final message became my holy grail of horror. Was it the key? A curse? I saw it in dreams, dots and dashes dancing like luminous worms in the dark. You listening now, safe in your home, maybe a light on. Feel that sudden prickle? That chill on your neck not from a draft? Look at the wires to your lamp, your phone charger. Are they just wires, or are they veins? Conduits? Have you ever felt, in a moment of absolute quiet, a strange hum from the walls, an electrical crackle that shouldn't be there? Alastair Thorne found a gap, a way to weave fate through the wires. Who's to say he's confined to King's Cross? Who's to say his next message isn't being tapped out, by dash, in the hidden circuits of your own life right now? The lines are everywhere. So might he be. Last night was the worst. The machine stayed silent until 4 a.m. The silence was worse than the clatter, a pressure on my eardrums. Then it began. Not the usual rhythm, but a frantic cacophony, as if dozens of hands hammered the machine simultaneously. Paper spewed out in a torrent, not in lines, but in dense blocks of encrypted characters, symbols belonging to no known code, mixed with scrambled numbers and letters. It was chaos, insanity. Amidst this graphical maelstrom, clear phrases surfaced like islands of horror. He is here with US. The lines cross at your name, Alfred. The wire of your life is ready to be cut. The air in the room crackled, static lifting my hair. The stench of decay and ozone was suffocating. I felt presences, not one, but many, crowding behind me, icy breaths on my neck, unintelligible whispers hissing in my ears, coming from the walls themselves, the exposed wires. Alastair Thorne wasn't alone. He'd brought others. Those he contacted? The victims? Something worse. The final message emerged from the chaos, clear as poisoned water. Sender: none. Telegraph office: King's Cross Station, 444. The telegraphist, Alfred, sees his own death reflected in the machine. The wires take life, slither, coil around his throat. He tries to scream, only static emerges. The body is found at dawn, eyes wide, burn mark in shape of a dash on neck. Signed, Alastair Thorne and the condemned of the wires. I look at the clock now, scribbling this confession on old message slips. 4:40 a.m. The air is colder than a Scottish winter. The smell of burnt copper and decay is unbearable. The wires snaking from the wall, from my machine, seem taut, vibrant, like sleeping adders about to strike. I hear whispers from the receiver, layered voices, one deep, rasping, familiar from old recordings, Alastair. The others are muffled shrieks, lamentations. The lights flicker, plunging the room into brief gulfs of absolute darkness. In those fractions of a second, I swear I see shapes, gaunt distorted shadows hovering in corners, long pale fingers brushing the silent machines. Alastair Thorne doesn't just want my death. He wants my soul trapped in the telegraph, another voice in his chorus of wire-borne horror, a new line on his map of suffering. He wants me to transmit the terror to the next night watchman, and the next, until every station in Britain echoes with the whispers of the condemned of the wires. The clock ticks forward. 4:42 a.m. The wires twitch slightly, like waking. The cold tightens around my throat. All I can do is wait for the final connection, and hope that wherever you are, your wires stay silent. But I doubt it. The lines of fate are always crossing, and Alastair Thorne never stops transmitting.